Thank you, Ada. Hey, Beyang. Welcome to HackerRank AI Day. Super good to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Good, good. It's been a while. I don't know if you remember, but the first time we caught up was maybe about 8 years ago, when you were
Yep.
trying to raise your Series A, Series B, and SourceGraph was beginning in the early stages.
Yep.
I think now it's evolved much more than here is code search. I think you have an exciting product called Cody. Maybe for the viewers, you can just like give a little bit of a background of Source Graph as well as Cody. But I'm just like curious to hear, did you anticipate that you would build something like Cody 8 years ago?
Yeah. So, quick background on SourceGraph. SourceGraph was really created to solve a critical pain point that we felt, Quinn and I. Quinn's our CEO, my co-founder. We're both developers by trade, and we felt that the biggest pain point in our jobs was not the writing part of the code. That was fun and enjoyable. It was more so just like, hey, all the code that you have to like understand and make sense of before you get to the fun part of the job. And so we thought about, what would be the ideal tool to accelerate the process of understanding the code that already exists so that you know what to write and you can write it quickly and effectively. And what we came up with was this tool that ended up being Code Search, taking inspiration from some of the existing search tools for developers, as well as some of the tools that were built internally that we saw inside large tech companies to kind of like navigate and explore the code. And that's what essentially became SourceGraph. It was a kind of tool for a developer to go and understand a huge corpus of code so that you could kind of like grok all the stuff that was in the code base and figure out what it is you needed to write and kind of build quickly and effectively because all that context would be paged into your working memory. Um, and as far as like, building something with AI, so my background was actually in AI. I did a concentration in machine learning. And at one point, I was seriously thinking about doing a PhD with my undergrad advisors, Daphne Kohler at Stanford. So she's kind of the early pioneers of machine learning. And so I love machine learning. I love a lot of things about it, the kind of potential to apply it in different domains. I love the kind of like grand vision of building something that approached a sort of like human-like intelligence. And I love the kind of like nitty-gritty details of, large matrix operations and, understanding the nuances of eigenvalues and singular value decompositions and kind of like mapping that to some sort of intuition. But I didn't end up pursuing it because at the time, working on dev tools and solving pain points was more appealing, and there wasn't the maturity of the models at that point. This was pre neural net revolution, and so it wasn't quite ready yet for any sort of like real world application. And so we decided to focus mainly on search and kind of mapping out the knowledge graph of code. Fast forward 10 years, a lot has happened in the intervening decade since we started SourceGraph. And it's just been wonderful diving back into all the AI stuff and playing around with the new models. And really, I think it's been serendipitous how much kind of like synergy, I guess, there is between the stuff that we were doing around investing in search quality and search ranking and mapping out the global graph of code and combining that with large language models and machine learning. Because as we've all seen now, RAG is a huge component of applying these things in practice, and the two fit together kind of very nicely.
Maybe we'll talk about Cody because that's the hot thing right now, like coding assistance.
Yep.
When you go on Twitter, you get so many things like, hey, here is an app that I actually built with that would have taken me 5 months. I built it in 5 days. I just asked the AI to go ahead and like write it. Um, and of course, like there's always like things that you can do that is going to give you a lot of social media likes and retweets and a lot
Yep.
of upvotes. Help discern what you think is hype and what you think is reality right now in the field of AI assistance.
That's a great question. And that's something that we've kind of spent a lot of time thinking about over the past year or so. There's a ton of hype in the field. And I think we've all seen the tweets of like, hey, like software development is dead. I can just, type English into this and I get a whole working app. I think, the question is like, we're seeing those tweets probably like a year ago at this point. It's like we're all still employed as software developers. So, where's the disconnect? And um, I think part of it is the gap between a really snazzy like demo, works on my machine or I got it to work once, and something that stands up to reliable day-to-day usage and works in a variety of environments and settings, namely your company's code base. That gap is actually quite wide. And closing that gap is what we've been investing in ourselves for the past year. So very early on, we decided to kind of like not overhype the things that we were building, because having earned the right to sell to all these customers over the past 10 years, we didn't really need to kind of like generate a huge ton of like hype and overset expectations. We had existing customers and partners who were kind of trusting us and relying on us to build something actually useful. And
Yeah.
so that's what we did essentially. We kind of hunkered down, and I think we were relatively early to identifying RAG as being kind of like the linchpin, context quality as being really critical to applying this stuff in practice. Because what we found is a lot of the demos that you've seen is like, oh, I spoke an entire application into existence. That's amazing. It like helps you. I would say it's like boilerplate plus plus. Like you want to generate kind of like a rough skeleton of an application, which is probably well represented on Stack Overflow and therefore well represented in the training set of the model. Machine LLMs can do that now. But in terms of combining that ability with the context of your specific code, all the myriad, abstractions and services and components that are in your code that you have to integrate with and also ideally make use of, doing that is still very difficult. And guess what? That's exactly what we built SourceGraph to help a human developer to do. And the context that we provide the human developer actually turns out to be just as useful for kind of like AI developer. So that's kind of what we've been doing as far as building up Cody and making it take advantage of all the existing tech that we built into SourceGraph.
Assume, I mean, who knows when the next breakthrough in terms of the architecture would come. So let's just assume it is going to be transformers for a while, at least like something we can hold on to in this whole dynamic change. So I'll just hold that as a constant and assume that context windows are going to get larger, you'll be easily able to hold your entire repo.
Yep.
RAG techniques and data structures and all of those things will get better. There's some amount of improvement in like capability and reasoning.
Yep.
But let's just hold the transformer architecture as the constant. Give me your sense of how the job of a developer would change, let's say, the next year and the next 5. Maybe 10 is too far. I'm sure we'll get another breakthrough. Maybe like the next 1 year and then the next 5 years.
In the short term, we should think of it in terms of automating more and more toil away. So, if you talk to the average developer and you ask them, how do you spend your time day to day, and specifically, how much of your time is actually spent coding, and of that coding time, how much of it is actually fun to write? Like, hey, this is like awesome. You're building stuff. You're doing what you wanted to do when you started programming and decided to become a software engineer. Probably like 1% is like that fun coding part, and the rest is meetings, conversations, trying to understand code. Yeah, exactly. That already exists. Boring, tedious tasks. Generating all the unit test cases, things like that. In the next 1 year, like all those sorts of tasks are kind of like ideal for AI automation. And so I think the next 12-month potential and outlook for coding AI is really just targeting those sources of toil so that you don't have to think about them. They don't have to take you out of the flow state of thinking about the algorithms and the data structures and the abstractions that you're trying to put together to meet the end user use case. And the more we can take those out, the more that it will kind of like accelerate the creative process of producing software. Um, in the longer run, I think it's really about just kind of like leveling up, right? When you get rid of like the lower level toil, and when you no longer have to be kind of like the mechanic in the weeds, making these like small modifications of the code, it frees you up to think about the higher level, more, I would say, at like the systems design level, and mapping the system design to the end user use case. And so, 5-10 years, I think that we'll have more people functionally doing what we would call like system architect or product manager or product engineer, someone in that role. More people will be doing that role, but that might just be what a software engineer is at that point. In the same way that, if we rewound, 20 years, I guess more than 20 years at this point, maybe like 30-40 years, there were a lot of like the job of a programmer used to be actually to like literally like press buttons, program things into the computer, and then for a while it was to translate kind of like the high level algorithm into assembly language, or machine instructions. That no longer exists because we've completely automated that. But we still have this thing we call a programmer. It's just different now because it's higher level, and I think the same general trend will apply.
Yeah. And I mean, and again, if you look at the sort of history with every programming language, assembly to Fortran, C++,
Yeah.
plus plus, Python, Go, you just like started to work on higher and higher level of abstraction.
Yep.
And along the way, you also had like a lot of technologies that came into play to assist you, IDE, cloud, CI/CD, that just like made a lot of the things easier to work on. I'm
Yep.
actually curious to hear your thoughts. I don't know what programming language you learned to code first. Mine was C and C++. I'm certainly dating myself. Uh, but
It was Java.
Java. Yeah. Um, and there used to be like two cohorts of people: people who loved pointers and people who hated pointers. I was actually a farmer for whatever reason. It was just like it just felt like I know what's going on under the hood.
Yeah.
That I could really get an understanding of what's going on, and like there was just
Yep.
like this cool thing to say, like, wow, you can manipulate the value in the memory location by just like putting an asterisk in front of it, so something on those lines. But it
Yep.
just allowed me to sort of understand the more nitty gritties, and I'm just like wondering, even the people early on, like who were actually literally doing assembly language and things on those lines would have even gone at a lower level, that they have a very good understanding of what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
But as you just like start to work on higher and higher levels of abstraction, like all of these things are taken away, which in some way has freed you up from
Yeah.
not worrying about those things. But it's also you're going away from the foundations, so to speak.
Yep.
And AI is just another technology that's probably going to lead you to working on at another higher level of abstraction. So do you actually worry that the next gen of developers would just get farther and farther away from the actual foundations? And is that a downside to it? I'm sure there's an upside in terms of productivity and like ability to get things done faster. What do you think is the downside?
Yeah, so I have, in a way, yes, but maybe I'll be a little bit contrarian here and say that maybe AI will actually help the next generation be have fewer layers of abstraction. Because if you think about software development right now, we've built a lot of abstractions to kind of deal with the underlying complexity of writing code, and some might say a lot of those abstractions are necessary evils because they prevent us from peeking under the hood and understanding how the system actually works. So like any sort of high level abstraction that kind of like eases the on ramp into producing software or building an app. I think every professional engineer at some point in their career reaches a point where you find the limitations of that abstraction. And then all of a sudden, instead of helping you do something, now you have to like break through all the magic that's been implemented. And it's a huge headache because oftentimes the abstractions were not designed to be gracefully broken, or leaky abstractions cause a lot of headaches. And I think the benefit of AI is if you have a thing that can just like generate working code much more quickly, again taking into the context the existing documentation and the context of your code, maybe there's a world in which we could cut out some of the abstractions that were necessary to deal with just like the volume of code that would have to be written. And yeah, to put it like very concretely, maybe the next generation could just write C++ with the help of AI. And then when you're reading through the code, you can actually see like the pointer dereferences. And so when you have to break through the barriers of abstraction, you can actually, it's easy. It's right there in front of you. And plus the AI can help you interpret, what's going on, instead of having to introduce kind of like a higher level language or framework that might be harder for you to break through.
That might very well be a very possible scenario. How do you think about learning? The way that you learned to code in Java, there was like a certain aspect to it in terms of foundations, understanding this is what a syntax is, this is what a
Yeah.
for class, this is
Yeah.
what an if statement is. Um, and right now, with AI, you can do all crazy things. Like you can just say, like, "Hey, go build an app."
Yep.
Do you think the first few steps of learning to become a developer uh, it should remain agnostic of any of the technological changes, where you just need to know the basics and then you can start to work on? I'm just curious, if you were to start programming right now, would you have followed the first few steps? Would it have been similar?
Yeah, so I think about this a lot because I am worried. A lot of the kind of like traditional education. I mean, it's far easier to cheat now. It's far
Yeah.
easier to like score 100% on the assignment without really thinking deeply about the problem. Um, I think about this a lot, especially I have a young kid, and I'm like, how should he go about learning this someday? He's still like 1 year old, so it's like it's early, but it's in the back of my mind. I actually think the quote unquote right way, or the way I'd recommend learning something, is to kind of approach it from two ends. Like on the one hand, yes, like fundamentals a lot, and I'm a big fundamentals guy. I like understanding the first principles. I like the elegance of constructing a mental framework and being grounded in firm foundations. At the same time, I think that maybe like the most important thing when you're first starting out is to have fun, and because that becomes like the motivator, that becomes like the carrot. It's almost like a psychological thing that will like pull you forward, pull you through like the challenges and the difficulties that you're inevitably going to encounter. And from that point of view, it's almost like just do the shortest thing that gets you to a point of like magic, right? So like it's almost like today, if I were just starting out, it's like, yeah, just hop into Cody or ChatGPT or like any of the other like AI code generating things and have it build an app for you and try to get something that like scratches an itch or impresses your friends. And then once you have that, like that's a good starting point. From there, maybe you want to like make some modification of that does something slightly different. It's not just like the standard boilerplate ChatGPT app, right? And then that's going to force you. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where like the AI is not going to be good enough, or like it doesn't do exactly what you want, and then you're going to have to go in and learn more of the fundamentals to make forward progress. But by then, you already have like this external motivation. Like you want to build that extra thing because you felt it, deeply yourself, or you've seen your friends' eyes light up, and so like that's kind of pulling you and motivating going, one level deeper and learning the fundamentals.
Yeah, no, I think the initial dopamine hit is a very important is a very important factor. Who knows how many lost developers there are who got stuck in a terminal error
Yeah.
and just gave up.
Like, why am I doing this? Like,
Yeah,
the sun's shining. I could be going out. Yeah.
yeah. So certainly the initial dopamine hit with an AI to generate an app or something can just like generate more curiosity even in thinking through that. I know we're coming towards the end, and maybe I'll just end with this note of, or ask your viewpoint on how do you think hiring developers. You talked about the work that developers are going to do is going to become more of system design, system architect, and things.
Yeah.
How do you think the hiring process will change over time?
That's a great question. I think for one, it's kind of like if you're asking people to write code as part of the process. Like
Yeah,
I've seen someone. I was at a WeWork once, and someone was doing like what was clearly like an interview task, and they had like ChatGPT open in the
Yeah.
other tab. So like they're trying to have the AI do the
Yeah.
assignment for them. So like definitely there's details that need to be worked out as far as like evaluating capability and talent go. I think like at a high level, it's going to be the same. It's always like one of the things that we look into when we're interviewing developers is how strong a command you have of the tools that you use. You know
Mm.
what went into the process of selecting the tools that you use, and why those tools and why not other tools. And AI coding tools are just now part of that toolkit. So it's kind of like, why did you choose Cody? Why did you choose ChatGPT? In what ways do you use it? In what ways do you find its kind of like limitations? That's part of the skill set now of being a software developer. And I don't know. I don't know how. I mean, it's not like the industry was good at evaluating programming talent before AI came along. Like everyone had kind of like, this is the best worst interview process. But maybe now it will actually be easier, perhaps, to have people actually build software in the interview process, because before it was kind of like, well, we don't want to take up your whole day
Yeah.
asking you to do this like day-long programming assignment. But now maybe there's more like software that's kind of buildable in a short amount of time if you're using the right tools. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have a good answer at this point.
That I mean, it's a moving target. As the AI tools continue to get better, your interview process needs to change as well. We think of it akin to a pilot in terms of, if you, I mean, 80% of the flight journey is autopilot.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you lower the bar for hiring the pilot. You still need the pilot to know the fundamentals of aeronautical engineering and, like, all of those things. So there's going to be that level of foundational element that will likely continue to stay. And then, like, how do you actually do it in a real world kind of a setting that mimics real world? Like, why do you need to have a proxy? Why can't your interview process be, okay, review this code and generate a pull request, and the hiring manager actually reviews a pull request? So that's got sort of it's a continuum, and that's sort of the direction in which we are even like pushing, because people are tired of lead code style problems, including us, who sort of presumably got benefited from the trend, but like even we are pushing all of our customers. We almost think of it as like a thing internally to help our customers, quote unquote, migrate from
Yeah.
those problems to make it more and more real world. Um, I know we're at time. You're super busy. Thank you for taking time and all the work that you do at Cody, and making developers work more enjoyable and productive. I hope the audience really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Beyang.
Thanks so much for having me, Vivek. This was a really fun conversation.